Hello and welcome to today's webinar. 2016 is the year of digital innovation, best practices for becoming a digital transformation visionary, brought to you by Ziff Davis and Mendix. I'm Karen Bannon and I'll be your moderator for today. We have just a few quick notes before we begin. Slides will advance automatically throughout our event. In addition, the console you're looking at is customizable. This means you can move and resize any of the windows you see open as well as explore widgets at the bottom of your screen. We'd like this event to be as interactive as possible, so at this time we invite you to ask any questions you may have along the way by using that question box on the left side of your screen. We'll get to as many of your questions as we can towards the end of our event. And finally, an on-demand presentation will be available after our event. Attendees will receive a link via email. According to IDC, 2/3 of CEOs plan to focus on digital transformation strategies for 2016. This means to survive and thrive in this ultra-competitive, ultra-connected world, your company will need to put digital innovation at the heart of your organization. Unfortunately, this is no easy task since managing the systems that keep business running leaves little time for innovation. That said, in today's webinar, our experts will discuss why digital transformation is critical to every business. They'll also talk about the role of Bimodal IT in digital innovation, how to create collaborative partnerships between business and IT, and about the tools that can make digital transformation work without disruption. They will finally discuss how to eliminate obstacles that impede innovation. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our experts, Diane Hinchcliffe and Kirby Wadsworth. Diane Hinchcliffe is the Chief Strategy Officer for 7/7 and a ZDNet columnist. A veteran of enterprise IT, Diane has been working for 2 decades with leading-edge methods to bridge the widening gap between business and technology. Kirby Wadsworth is a CMO at Mendix. He brings more than 2 decades of technology marketing experience to his role, including executive marketing roles at both public and private companies. And with that, let's get started. Kirby, let's turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. And welcome, everybody. Really appreciate your time. As a good friend of mine says, digital transformation and digital innovation is the kale of 2016. Everybody's talking about it, and it seems maybe some people are actually even eating it. What's interesting, I think, about this space is how far-reaching it is. As you see in the slides, IDC is talking about, and Gartner is talking about, and Forrester is talking about, and all industry analysts are talking about the fact that this is high on the agendas of both CEOs and CIOs. And so what we're going to talk about for the next hour or so is what it is, what is digital transformation, some great examples to sort of inspire you. In order to become a visionary, as Steve Martin said about being a millionaire, the first thing you need is $1 million. So the first thing about being a visionary is you need a vision. At the end of this conversation today, we hope to have at least inspired you to create your own vision of what digital transformation and digital innovation can do for your business or your organization. We have a lot of great examples of that, of the way that this technology has been applied and the implications and outflows of it. One of the things I think that it's important to understand when we think about the whole approach to digital innovation is that you can make a mess of this. As Gartner says, when they say 75% of IT organizations will have bimodal, what they're really talking about is that they'll have split their IT organizations into a group that keeps the lights on, that keeps the organization running, that manages the data, that manages the basic systems, and another, what they might think of as a Mode 2 group, which does digital innovation or creates differentiating applications that are more modern. But what really is happening here is the entire organization is transforming. So it's not as simple as just splitting things up and saying, okay, you guys worry about keeping the lights on and you worry about being innovative. Everyone is becoming innovative. And it's important to think through, as you go into this process, how it affects all aspects of the business. This isn't just a technology problem. If it was, it would be pretty simple. It's a cultural problem, it's a people problem, and it's a whole new way of doing business from a process perspective as well. So when we think about it, And when we work with our clients and customers to help them see their vision through, we like to think in terms of what we describe as the 4 Ps. There are at least 4 elements of this that you have to consider. Your portfolio of applications and needs, so from the software perspective and your interface needs, the people that you have in your organization and the culture and all of the other associated human-related wetware, the processes that you actually follow as a company and what type of company you are, rigidly structured, government-controlled, or innovative and relatively high-flying. And then the 4th area, which people don't often think about, is the need for what we describe as an innovation platform. This is a set of tools and technology that allow you to innovate, that allow you to manage the innovation process and keep things from becoming a mess. And it's typically cloud-based. It's almost always open. We espouse the use of visual modeling to make things happen very quickly. But the point is, it takes all 4 of these working together, and it takes attention to detail in the planning process of all 4 of these to really be effective in implementing a digital transformation project. So let me break it down for just a minute here and kind of think about those 4 things as they apply. When we think about a portfolio of applications or software, as I said, we think about core systems, the systems that actually run the business, the things like payroll. They don't change very often. They have clearly defined sets of requirements. They have often regulatory control issues. They can't change. The records have to be maintained for long periods of time. And then you have digital applications, what we euphemistically describe as digital applications. These are the applications that often interface with your customers, interface with things like IoT devices. These are modern, new applications that provide differentiating value. 2 things to note about them. They don't have clear requirements because you're really operating in a space of imagination and what could we do, not what do we have to do or what have we always done. And the rate of change of those requirements or the rate of the change of the applications is very, very fast, because as soon as you learn something about how your clients want to interoperate with your mobile application, you'll want to change it and make it better. Or someone will think of a way to automate an existing business process that you hadn't automated before, and you'll need to do it very quickly. And as you do, you'll learn along the way. So you don't really have the luxury of having clearly defined market and business requirements as you're building out those applications. So there are 2 distinct kinds of information technology infrastructure. So if you think about breaking your portfolio up, you can see why we get into this discussion about bimodal or 2-speed IT. So the implications of that. If we think about mode 1, which is this well-defined kind of low rate of change, and then mode 2, which is fluid with very high rates of change and very limited requirements, we apply that to the people, process, and platform technology space. What we find is, in mode 1, traditional sort of large-scale development teams work fine. That's been working for 25, 30, 40 years. Why change now? But in the mode 2 space, what the experience is proving is that very small teams of cross-functional people who are very flexible, who have technical skills and business understanding and affinity for getting things done and moving fast, put into small groups and enabled and empowered, will produce much faster than very large groups with clearly defined roles and responsibilities and very rigid structured process. It only makes sense. The second thing is about the process itself. In a traditional environment where you have defined requirements and low rates of change, waterfall processes where you have lots of checks and balances, where you have lots of rules and regulation about deployment, where you have separation of development and operations, all make sense because making a mistake could be catastrophic. But in the mode 2 environment, if you make a mistake or if you do something that isn't working the way you want it to, it's very easy to change, and the implications are very simple. If your website isn't quite perfect or your portal isn't quite great or your mobile application doesn't look quite the way you want it to, it's easy to change those things, and they don't have implications across the entire business or regulatory landscape. So you can have a more agile process, move much more quickly, and implement change in smaller increments a lot faster. And then finally, there's this platform methodology, or there's this platform conversation. In mode 1, traditional platforms make sense, right? The data often needs to be secure. People often want to keep it inside their four walls. The applications themselves have been around for a very long time, so they lend themselves to running on infrastructures and environments that have been around for a long time. And there's no reason to change if they're working well, other than cost efficiency, which is important but not the topic of choice in this conversation. On the mode 2 side, however, it makes sense to have a platform which is very flexible. They're almost always cloud-based now because you want scalability and you want to pay for what you use, and they can survive without the rigor and structure that you have on the other side, because these applications, while not spurious or unimportant, these applications can be transient for the most part, and you can make changes quickly, so it makes sense to do that in the cloud. Plus, you want to access component services that are available really only in the cloud, things like data analytics and predictive analytics and machine learning services, or massive data lakes and things like that primarily don't exist in the traditional mode 1 platform. So you need a different kind of a development platform and a different kind of an operational platform for mode 2. The kind of things that we think that you need in that platform, or what our experience has lent us to believe that you need in that, are also in 4 sort of boxes. The first component, which is critical, is the ability to manage all these incoming requests and requirements and change. So you need an agile project management infrastructure that helps you capture user stories and prioritize them. The second component you need is a visual, as I mentioned before, model-driven development environment that allows you to take those user stories and turn them into applications that the business owners can then very quickly determine meet the need or not. Because remember, you don't have defined requirements. So you need to be in a highly collaborative, highly iterative development environment, where business and IT is working literally side by side in front of the same terminal. So that has to be done in a visual way, because most IT people, don't know R programming and don't know C++, as well as the developer community. So we put that into a common model that you can see visually and understand what it looks like and make changes quickly. The third thing, which we think is important, is the ability to instantly or almost instantly deploy those applications. Once we see what we see is what we get, we like, then we hit a button and deploy it immediately so that there's no delay. And then finally, what we find is once you start this process rolling, many applications will be developed through this model very quickly, because there's a lot of pent-up business demand for custom applications. And as soon as you start going down that path with multiple applications, you need DevOps capability and the ability to manage multiple applications at once. So you need all 4 of these components in a platform in order to make this whole process work. Thankfully, that is, in fact, what Mendix offers. As we go forward, we'll hear some great stories about how digital transformation and innovation has been applied in the business world. But a couple of examples from us, you can see that these are customers of Mendix that have implemented this platform across multiple industries and across multiple different kinds of companies, everything from government services, higher education, all the way to finance. So with that sort of brief introduction, let me throw this over to Dion, and we'll take it from there with the rest of today's discussion.
Great. Thanks, Kirby, for that excellent overview of the landscape that we're playing in terms of digital transformation. Now, I'm hoping to take us through some of the best practices that the industry has started to learn. The story is still unfolding with digital transformation. We're still learning a lot. We do have, however, a high-level sense of some of the strategies that do seem to work. So my name is Diane Hinchcliffe. I'm a columnist for ZDNet, eBizQ, occasionally Information Week, and other periodicals. I judge the CIO 100 Awards for CIO Magazine every year. I get to see a lot of interesting digital transformation stories, and I've written a couple of books, including the best-selling Social Business by Design. And so I'm hoping to use this front row seat. I advise C-level executives on digital transformation on all four major continents, and I have a lot of experience. And some of the things that we've learned, I'm hoping to take you through that for the rest of the session. Please do save your questions for the end, last 10 minutes or so. We'd love to talk with you about some of the things that you may be seeing or questions you may have. So it's clear at this point that digital is changing everything that we do, both in our personal lives and in our businesses, and that it's the challenge is adapting how we work and how we live to the possibilities that digital enables, and it has real competitive implications, as we'll see. So the question is now is how can we speed up the adaptation of our organizations so that we can survive, we can sustain our businesses, and continue to provide value in very different operating conditions. Probably the signature challenge that we face today is that we live in exponential times, that the rate of change is increasing exponentially. The capabilities of the technologies we're using, whether that's storage or computing power, user experience, whatever it is, the number of touch points that we have to participate in is increasing exponentially. Yet our resources are not. The way that we deliver IT to our organizations isn't increasing exponentially. In fact, budgets are flat or even down in some parts of the world in the IT organization. Yet technology spend is growing much faster. So somewhere innovation is happening in most businesses. And so the question really is, how do we adapt? I mean, the signature question for most organizations is how do we adapt to exponential times when we have to deal with linear growth models, linear budgets, linear resources. So the writing is on the wall. There's some data that many of you may have seen that's been circulating around. The average lifespan of a typical S&P 500 company is dropping precipitously from 60 years on average in the 1960s to about 12 to 13 years today. In fact, Harvard recently published the fact that 80% of the Fortune 500 companies that existed in the year 2000 are no longer with us. They've been merged, acquired, or otherwise transformed. And the primary cause, according to a study done by S&P 500 and MIT Technology Review, is failure to adapt to technology conditions. Right. So if you look at the Borders and the Blockbusters and the Nokias and the Kodaks, they were unable to continue moving their use of technology forward and be able to get ahead of the marketplace and be able to provide value. And so they ceased to exist as organizations. And this is the challenge we have today. If we're living in exponential times, that's a tough curve to ride. And so how can we do it? Do techniques, do strategies exist that are helping some organizations ride that curve? Well, it does appear so. And what we're hoping to present in some of the best practices here are some concrete things that you can do as an organization to live in exponential times. So we've had some good indications that over the years that digitally networked organizations seem to get outsized benefits in terms of growth. We're tracking revenue and profit in this chart here. This is a great example of a large-scale data that's now available showing that organizations that get fully networked, that they're digitally connected to their ecosystems do a lot better. 25% average improvement in organizational outcomes. That's competitively significant. Now, most organizations aren't there. In fact, on this chart up on the upper left, you can see that most organizations are only getting 1 or 2% benefits from their digital engagement efforts. That is providing applications and digital touch points wherever their customers want them. That's inside and outside the organization both, right? So this shows here that some organizations are achieving it, and the ones that are getting the most results are getting better connected. They're fully digitally networked inside and out. And so this again is more evidence that not only can organizations do better, but when they do it, they see competitively significant results. So that is encouraging. But if we look at some of the examples of organizations trying to ride that exponential curve, we see examples like this. When General Motors realized that the future of the automobile is the connected car, right? Where you have many more devices and touch points inside the vehicle that is connected to your mobile devices, that you can manage your entire traveling and automotive lifestyle using mobile devices. They realized that was where their industry was going, and they tried to solve the problem the traditional old way, and they hired 8,000 programmers to prepare for the mobile automotive revolution. And that's basically taking the model the understanding of that the challenge we face in our organizations to digitize, to transform is vast. And so they threw resources at the problem. The question is there a way of working smarter, right? Most organizations are not in a position to hire, at least within IT, the kind of staff they're looking for to tackle these problems, right? This is an exceptional response to the challenge of digital transformation today. So what are other organizations are doing? And probably the most respected example of digital transformation that has happened in the industry is the case study of Nordstrom. They're the high-end retailer that has got some of the highest customer satisfaction scores and the highest respect in the industry. And when we look at what they have done to digitally transform, we see several things have stood out. One, they've been doing it for a long time. They've been investing steadily for 10 years on preparing their foundation for digital change, realizing that they have to have many more digital touch points and more digital ways of engaging with their marketplace. And so what's interesting is that the first thing they did is that they made an extraordinary series of investments, and they let them ride for 5 years. Most IT projects, for those of you in the industry, are looking now these days at getting results within as little as 6 months. But they realized that if they were going to be in digital, that it was going to be a marathon, not a sprint. And then they began rolling out digital innovation after digital innovation. Their mobile apps, for example, are among the highest rated in the entire Apple App Store, 5 stars average rating, and they have some really cutting-edge capabilities. And a quick call out this quote here at the bottom of the Harvard Business Review case study. The persistent digitization of Nordstrom business has allowed the company to grow revenues by more than 50% in the last 5 years. For the cutthroat competitive space that retail is, that is a remarkable outcome. A 10% result over that period of time would have been very respectable. So what did they do that was so different? The thing that they did is, instead of just focusing on an individual type of solution, we have to have mobile apps, or we have to get into analytics, or we have to be socially engaged with our customers, which are all true, things that all have to be done. When we realized we have to be prepared to tackle new opportunities in the marketplace as they arise in very short time windows. Instead, what they did is they tended to the details of building a truly integrated digital capability at a foundational level by making their data accessible across the organization for any potential solution and opportunity as it came up, and they simplified their processes overall for realizing technology. So this is things like creating APIs for many of their systems, opening up the CRM systems and ERP so that when a business opportunity in a digital channel opened up, they could quickly jump on it. They knew they would have access to the data they needed to do it. And they knew that process of doing that and wiring them together and getting through any of the hurdles, from governance to, as Kirby said, the regulatory hurdles in many organizations. Customer privacy is a big issue that we're increasingly all going to have to be responsible for. So it's just building this foundation, and that's what took them the first 5 years. And then they reaped the benefits by being able to take the latest tools that can use open data and the latest integrative capabilities and do something. So if you don't have these core capabilities established, integration with these new digital capabilities is very difficult. That's the lesson, and why many organizations are currently having struggles. So another cross-check on what we have to do to digitally transform is some great work that Shell executive Arie Geus did on what there has been companies that have survived all these upheavals. Right now we're in the middle of digital disruption. But there are organizations that have survived all of the disruptions since corporations were created. And he looked at the 40 longest-lived companies, and he tried to extract a common pattern. Did they have something what did they have in common that allowed them to survive world wars and and the Industrial Revolution and the Information Revolution and now the Digital Revolution. And it looked at three things, and they will kind of inform the best practices as we unbox them in the rest of this webinar. One is they had ecosystems and they were very decentralized. They tolerated eccentric activities at the margins, and they have allowed local groups in the organization more autonomy over their decisions and permitting them to innovate and tap into innovation in places they didn't expect. And when we talk about things like citizen development and hackathons and so on, that will be very important, developer networks and so on. They had a strong identity that allowed them to survive that decentralized, loosely controlled process. They had a good culture. But perhaps the most important is that they were proactive in looking for change, in dealing with change. And that's where we're at a high watermark in technology today is the process of a very rapid exponential change that we have to adapt with in a sustainable way. And instead of waiting for them to be for the marketplace to force them to respond, they sought it out. They eagerly sought out, these long-lived companies, new opportunities and new capabilities and new ideas. And they didn't wait, and they got started. And that's been one of the big lessons of digital is the organizations that get going seem to reap the benefits, and that is true of the companies that have survived all of them. And so these attributes seem to be a natural fit for the digital era and part of the mindset of being a digital transformation visionary. So we can look at organizations. This is one of my favorite case studies. I actually worked a little bit on this project. Is Best Buy, the number one electronics retailer in the United States still, realized that they were falling behind companies like Amazon, and they hadn't opened up their business to be reused and remixed in other businesses. The famous example was when the Nintendo Wii came out, that somebody built a simple web page that could query all the inventory pages on the Best Buy's website, and thereby bringing down their ERP system over the holidays for all their stores. But people wanted to see where this very scarce product was so they could buy it for their children. And since Best Buy did not allow others to innovate or build on top of their IT resources to build these kinds of solutions, they were forced to shut it down as opposed to taking advantage of it. And so they've since launched the Best Buy Developer Network. They have hundreds of applications that have been built on top of their information and their APIs. So they're starting to do what Nordstrom did, right? But doing it externally. And we see that some organizations are very far ahead. For example, Expedia gets 90% of its revenue from APIs. eBay gets 60%. There's over 12,000 commercial APIs available. These are feeds where people have opened up their business and say you can build on it. And the next generation of tools allows companies to easily plug these APIs into what they're doing. And this seems to be a pattern that is becoming very common among the digerati, the digital leaders, in that saying, I can't do this all myself, right? We live in exponential times. We simply can't do everything possible with our IT systems and our data. What if we made it possible for anyone who has an idea to do that? So the goal here really, if we're trying to look at it, is that we've got all of our business processes, all the different functional areas, and we've got to engage with the world, and we have to do it at scale, right? That's the challenge, and we want to wrap analytics around it. And so the issue is if we can't do this in a centralized way, how can we engage and connect with the resources, with the people, with the organizations that might be able to help us unleash a steady pace of innovation? This could be inside our organizations, or this could be without. And so we're seeing that organizations that are successful as digital visionaries are creating things like this big picture here, saying, let's understand all of the digital channels that we have, all of the different constituencies, right, all of the technologies, and then designed new multi-channel products and user experiences that are required. And so the real challenge with this is that only a fraction of that potential can be realized using the traditional model of IT. And Kirby talked about there's a mode 1 for our core systems that don't change very much, and a mode 2, but it almost seems like, and increasingly appears that you almost need a mode 3, a way to tap into your entire ecosystem and say, what can we do with what we have? Most organizations are sitting on incredibly valuable data and IT systems that are being vastly underutilized. That's the message, and our survival depends on unleashing it, right? So one of the things when I talk to CIOs, I ask them, I test them with the information on this chart here, trying to say, well, what digital headwinds if we live in exponential times, what are we going to face over the next 36 months? And with things like IoT and the rolling out of dozens of mobile applications in many organizations that all generate data, we're facing 10 to 100 times more applications. And the fact that if you're trying to succeed in digital business, the venture capital industry will very quickly tell you that most of your experiments will fail, right? Only 1 in 10 will succeed, and only 1 in 100 will actually own the industry, right? There's 1.5 million apps in the Apple App Store, but there are only a few really large winners, and the same is true of software as a service and so on. So we need a way of innovating at scale to match the rate of change, and that's the challenge. And we'll need 5 to 10 times more integration. And when I present all these numbers to our senior IT leaders, there's a lot of head nodding, and so this is what's making us think that and believe that we need new techniques to tap into technological innovation. So perhaps the biggest lesson of digital over the last 10 years and looking at how do we kind of invert our process of IT innovation is that we have to let the network do the work somehow. Right? We have to reach outside ourselves, and we'll look in a few minutes at programs that can actually do this, at techniques and ideas that can actually achieve that and allow us to make these numbers make sense for our organizations to be able to tackle the size of the challenge. So why can't our organizations change fast enough? Right, we see that upper right here is a typical chart. You can find these easily on the internet showing the rate of adoption for each new technology is faster and faster. When the iPhone came out, it took years for it to become a mainstream device. When the iPad came out, it happened in a year. When the Apple Watch came out, it sold as many units as the iPhone did in, I think it was the first 4 years. So and did that in the first few weeks. So there seems to be 2 challenges. One, the outside world, which is creating all this technology, has different priorities in our business, and it's changing faster than us, and that's taking the agenda away from the traditional IT process, because enterprise IT, business IT, used to lead technology. That's where a lot of these things like laser printers and corporate computer networks all came from, was the business world. Well, now it's completely opposite. Almost all of this is coming from the consumer world. Not all of it, but most of it. And our leaders of our organizations, our core competency lies in the business and not in digital, right? Most of us are not yet technology companies, yet everyone has to become, as a significant component of their business, be a technology company, even a technology leader. And that's why organizations can't change fast enough. So how can we get there? Well, one, we see that leadership-driven change is the fastest and most effective. But, by the way, it's not absolutely required. There are some examples of companies that have, despite leadership not having a core competency there, not driving digital transformation, are successful. So for those of you that are in that situation, you can take hope, even though it's going to be hard. But if we look at a variety of, if we look at the top 10 change success factors, we look at actual, some recent case studies, surveys of which organizations are having faster adoption. We see the executive participation impact success a great deal. It's actually 2.5 times faster. So when I say great deal, we're not talking double-digit percentages. We're talking triple-digit. It can make all the difference. So if we look at who is getting the best benefits, MIT Sloan Management Review did a great digital transformation survey with a wealth of very detailed data breaking down who's having good luck with digital today. And they identified 4 cohorts. One, there's the beginners over at the right, and their profits are taking a huge hit because they're spending a lot of R&D ineffectively, right? And the market valuation is dropping. You have the conservatives that are actually doing okay because they're not spending a lot on R&D, but they're not growing in terms of revenue. The new digital innovators are taking it away. You've got the fashionistas who are following every technology trend, so they're taking a hit on profitability, but they're hitting some successes as well, right? But overall, from a market value standpoint, they're not doing that well. But those that really understand digital and understand how to identify which parts are important, which are fads, and which are trends that have staying power, those that seem to have the deepest understanding of it, they're doing very well, right? So, and these are, the next generation of multi-$100 billion companies, like if you look at the Facebook and Google and Amazon and so on. They are the leaders of the digitality, although there's many others. So how do we become one of them? Well, the problem is that we have to start with leadership. And we see over and over again that organizations that tend to be slow have not set this as an organizational priority. And this is a list from that same MIT Sloan Management Review Digital Transformation Survey, shows that out of all the issues, virtually none of them are technology-based. Only one, the limitations of IT systems, is in the top of the list. Right, rest of it is no sense of urgency, not enough funding. Who's supposed to do it is not clear. Lack of vision, unclear business case. Even though we can't see digital as driving forward vast growth in the digitality, there's often a sense of we don't know what to do. So that has to be addressed. How do we do that? How can leaders, and that leadership can come from anywhere in an organization, even outside. What can leaders do to speed digital adaptation? So some best practices are starting to emerge. One is we have to close the gap between technology and business. This is a survey I did of every priority list I could find last year for technology leaders, and every digital priority list I could find for business leaders. And they lined up on almost no points except for security. Everyone believes that is a top priority right now. That has to come to an end. It won't happen right away. But we have to figure out how, in many organizations I go to, the IT division is on a different floor or even in a different building. It's a very consistent pattern because there's very different cultures in the technology space and the business space. So we have to address that. And again, how do we do that? So if we get into the best practices, first we see that just rewarding people for successful digital transformation works. Right? We see that it's also done by the digitality more than anything else. Very public awards and recognition, financial incentives, proactive personal advancement of those showing effective digital leadership, and then getting them in place. Of course, being careful, the Peter Principle. So reward structures aligned to digital transformation as a goal, as a professional goal seems to work. That seems to be effective. Reverse mentoring can be a way of planting the seed. One organization I worked with is the German pharmaceutical company Bayer, and I like this story because you can kind of see the screenshot down there a little bit. That's the executive team of Bayer with their reverse mentors. These are young people who are very digitally savvy and understand how these new digital companies work. They're employees of the company typically, but not always. They can be invited visitors. And they work with the senior executives. Sometimes you have to try the pairing several times so you find a good fit. And it works both ways, of course. But we see that in the chart in the upper right, in the green, is the majority. Most leaders are open to this reverse mentoring, meeting on a regular basis and learning about the digital space from young people who really understand it in their own unique way. And that process bears reporting very interesting results in terms of rolling out new technologies much more quickly because these are common topics that they talk about with the reverse mentors, and that can help with the leadership issues that we saw a few slides back. That's very significant. Establishing digital KPIs. Most organizations have key performance indicators for their regular traditional business. But we have to establish digital versions of KPIs. As Drucker famously said, you just simply cannot manage what you aren't measuring. And they should be based on your new digital business models, whatever they are. And they should be public, and everyone should know what they are. If you're managing to them, you'll see them. It's beyond the scope of this webinar to look into them, but those are now becoming increasingly well established what they are, and you can find very good information online about what you should be using. Culture change. This is, to bridge that IT and business divide, we have to close the gap. We have to rematrix our organizations, reblend them to be technology companies, and leaders have to model the behavior they want to see. Right, so they have to be using this digital technology. They have to be in circulating with the digitality and learning from them. And it's very common is to see now tours of startups from. I was working with a very large conservative bank last year, and they arranged for tours and meetings with the leaders of many Silicon Valley startups. That can really help. And if leaders are out there doing it, then the rest of the organization can be doing it. You have to have a change program. The Center of Excellence model is very popular for taking an individual technology like analytics or mobile or collaboration or whatever it is that you're trying to do, and then activating on it. So you have it can accelerate the organization by bringing in expertise and spreading the knowledge wide across the organization. And we see that education really is the very first thing and the sustained thing that these processes need to do, and then they have a field ready to be seeded with digital change that is prepared to receive it. And so it involves culture change, executive leadership, identifying strategic goals, and creating a roadmap, redesigning business processes, and all the other things that have to go along with that. But even that process isn't going to be enough to deal with the fact that you live in exponential times. And the one realization we've come to is that everyone is in the digital division, and they can help pull the rope. And so that's every department has an understanding of their local part of their business. What if we could give them the tools that allow them to realize the digital solutions that needed to happen, things that they could actually manage to work with? That's one of the things when we'll talk about some of the tooling here in just a few minutes that allows that kind of localized digital transformation. But one good story is, again, a story of Best Buy. They had the same challenge in their organizations in that they had 100,000 people working in their stores. These young kids are around technology all day and around customers and their problems all day. Why couldn't they come up with that? Why couldn't they survey them for ideas and then take the best ideas and fly them back and give them a development team and try and realize something in a few weeks? And that's exactly what they did. And if they could develop something compelling in a few weeks, then they give them the option to continue working on it. And these are the types of processes organizations are putting into place, and greatly accelerated by leaders, of course. But what if we could empower that in a more systematic way? And so we're seeing a number of things that are emerging to enlist the entire organization to pull on that digital rope. Right? So employee incubators are popular, like the Best Buy model. We see developer networks facing business partners on the outside and even the inside of the organization to say, hey, we're going to productize our IT resources so that you can build something amazing out of it. And that's happening. I urge you to go look at the Sears Developer Network, the World Bank Developer Network. Best Buy has one. More and more traditional organizations have this thing that says we can't do it all, nor should we. It's simply too expensive, and we can't provide what the marketplace needs, either inside our organization or to our partners or to the marketplace. Bring your own technology. While the trend has been kind of going all over the map the last couple of years, we still see that organizations are generally encouraging employees to get much more involved in technology selection because, again, they have the capacity to do it. We see citizen development, tools that allow almost anyone to create effective IT applications. Might need IT to come in and make sure it's secure and to govern it and provide some of the final business logic and rigor around it. But citizen development is really a thing. A great IBM survey, it was late in 2014, confirmed that most organizations 80% of organizations are evaluating some way of tapping into all of this latent capacity. What if we give tools so that people could self-service? And then hackathons has been a significant trend the last few years, and there's now very potent examples saying, hey, even creating a developer network isn't enough. An employee incubator isn't enough. What if we created events that actually encourage lots of people and rewarded them to get started, like not over the next few months, but on a given day or week? And those are getting increasingly popular. In fact, it's such a hot topic that we'll spend a couple minutes on it. So Citibank did the same thing. It realized they didn't have enough mobile apps and that they weren't experts in creating compelling consumer mobile apps. So they opened their data. This is in the Latin America market. They're now going to do this in North America. Announced a public hackathon. They got 100 different mobile apps, and they ended up with 2 large successes out of that. All they did was open up their IT systems in a controlled way and create the event, and 100 applications came through. That's the kinds of techniques and best practices that are emerging to help companies become digital transformation visionaries. There's been many other examples, too, including some that have led to well-known venture capital events. We see banks do it. We see healthcare companies do it with MedTech Boston Hackathon, which was very successful. And so we see more companies wanting to engage in that. We also see a great example is the CIO of the Federal Communications Commission, David Bray, is a big believer in this model right here, is saying let's gather change agents with all their great ideas wherever they are in the organization. Let's get them out of the woodwork. Let's get their ideas. Let's give them the resources to realize them if possible, because we can't do it all, and is the empowering model for what's called citizen development. And that's enabling everyone to realize digital transformation. And it's not literally everyone. It's not 100% of your organization. It's whoever can, whoever is willing, whoever has the time. That's what we have to focus on. That's how we can start tackling the exponential challenge. And I have a model here. It's more complicated than we need to look at, but you can find my article about it online on ZDNet. We see organizations actively enabling this and being successful now with citizen development. Platforms like If This Then That, Mendix, the sponsor of this webcast, and others are providing the technologies to really make this possible and make it happen. And as Kirby had talked about earlier, we require more than one mode of IT. Whether we have an agile team and then a core team, we do think that there's a period that a middle mode is missing. So currently the model is kind of moving to a more nuanced. Bimodal IT has challenges because the pioneers don't really get along with the town planners. What if we had a middle model, town settlers? But we do require multimodal IT. It seems to be a consistent pattern if we look at who's in the digital audience and who's successful in the space out there. So where have pioneers found significant value? This is a great summary of those organizations that have largely gone through a successful wave of digital transformation. Where I can summarize where they got the benefits, and customer experience, hands down, was the leading benefit. Improved internal communications, enhanced productivity, better products and services. These are areas that had high degrees of success and were focuses of digital transformation, and places that have respect in the organization. The problem with digital transformation is if you change something too small, no one really cares. If you do it too big, but you don't get it right the very first time, you are in trouble. So it's called the Goldilocks problem, is what I refer to that as. So the future holds a lot for digital leaders. New hybrid roles that are multidisciplinary, skills and capabilities in unexpected places, including collecting case studies of regular business people who are developing applications. There are now many good case studies that have solved real problems, large problems in their organization. Skills for all these new models. People who are designers, mediators, communicators, empathizers. Those are the future of the digitalati, right? Orchestrators and transdisciplinarians, people who can connect and create. That's the future of digital transformation, and they're everywhere in your organization. So the biggest takeaways here: create a sense of ownership for digital for everyone. Get going. Those who wait don't generally do very well. Education is the first and top step. Find your enlightened leaders and get them to sponsor the digital change. Get everyone to pull the rope. Think big enough, but start medium-sized, a Goldilocks problem. You got to get the funding and a change plan. Talk to your board. You have to take your plan and adjust it based on fast feedback loops. Almost everything you start out doing is probably going to be mostly not quite right, and you need to adjust that based on the contact with the market as fast as possible. Take those plans that you've created and communicate them and keep them updated. Education and communication is essential for digital transformation. Measure those KPIs. Provide clear and frequent feedback to the digital agents, change agents. What do you need from them? What are you hoping from them? And keep telling them. Proactively seek out and employ the best new digital innovations. And borrow from the leaders. Much, not all, but much of what they do is visible out there. And learn from it. Improve it. Get better than it. And keep updating your digital good practices. Best practices is not my favorite word because it's different for everybody. What's good for one company, best for one might not be good for another. But take the good practices and learn. And so that takes us to just about the end of this webinar. We're about to take questions, so please don't go anywhere. But perhaps the most important lesson not to forget is that digital transformation is about people. We saw that in that study. Technology barriers are there. You have to have the right tools and the right infrastructure. Invest, like Nordstrom did for several years, in the right foundation and bring in the enabling tools. But people are what's going to make digital transformation happen. And it's about a bright long-term future together with your ecosystem. So thanks for joining us. I'm going to hand this back over to our our webinar moderator, and Kirby and I are ready to take your questions on this very exciting subject.
Thanks so much, Diane. A lot of great information in there. As he mentioned, it is time for our Q&A portion of the event. So at this time, we'd like to invite you, our listeners, to ask questions using that question box on the left side of your screen. And we actually had quite a few questions coming in while both gentlemen were speaking. So why don't we jump right in with this first question from Rafi. And Rafi, I think this question goes to you, Diane. It says, by digital, do you mean internet and cellular mobile-based global systems? Because everything after the microelectronics revolution is based on digital systems.
Yeah, while the primary channel, the biggest arena is going to be, we're talking about the global internet and all of the mobile device networks connected to it. It's not the whole picture, of course, and most organizations inside have built a vast proprietary digital ecosystem based on standards. Yeah, so we're talking everything, the full digital package, but everything is becoming connected. But I think we are starting to even look at, because of the scale of some of these moving beyond internet digital technologies, with 50 billion IoT devices coming, the 1980s era model of the internet is finally going to have to kind of get upgraded. So yeah, so we're talking about the whole digital landscape in short.
Okay, why don't we throw a question over to Kirby. So Kirby, this comes from John. John says, I see and believe in these trends for my future business applications, but what about my existing apps and processes? I'm not sure which sounds harder, moving old apps to a new platform or having two separate tools.
Yeah, it's a great question. So that's when we go to that portfolio topic. The way we typically approach this is we look at and break up the systems based on their intent. Are they, often that's a customer-facing application, or as was discussed, could be an IoT application, use of modern mobile devices that the traditional applications weren't necessarily intended or built to do. But really, I think it comes down to thinking about the applications from a rate of change and definity of requirements perspective. And once you kind of understand that and split up the portfolio, then it becomes obvious that it doesn't necessarily make sense to move existing systems of record onto a differentiation kind of platform. They don't need and they won't take advantage of the capabilities of that platform, and vice versa. It's almost impossible to build differentiating applications on a platform that was built for systems of record. So it really isn't a matter of moving one to another. It's really a matter of making sure that you have the right applications going in the right direction, and the right systems and tools, and as we said, people and processes to support the different kinds of applications that you're dealing with. I don't think there's any way around. Just to finish the thought, I don't think there's any way around this of having only one approach to this. There are many organizations now that are talking about a holistic approach, which really comes down to it's the systems of differentiation are becoming more important and sort of taking over the attention. But you're always going to have, I think, for our planning horizon, you're going to have a need for systems of record that are stable and non-changing. And so I think you're going to have to get over the fact that you need a bifurcated approach. Oh, excuse me.
Okay, thanks. So let's see. We've got a question here from Daryl. So Daryl wants to know, aren't billing and payment systems moving to your model too? Diane, you want to grab that one?
So that's very interesting. So for the new part of your business, so assuming an organization is building digital business models that aren't driving the company from the outset, yeah, those parts of the new digital business will probably not start as the traditional mode 1 type of IT, that since there has to be a high rate of change and a lot of variability, and you have to be able to roll lessons learned from your experiments quickly back into the billing and payment systems, I would agree that they can be mode 2. I think the challenge organizations is their instinct is, oh, that's a mode 1 type system. and so we're going to put that back in mode 1. That will harm your digital transformation if you overdo it. You need to figure out. This is one of the reasons why there's probably more than just 2 modes in IT. There might be a middle mode for something like that says that's not going to go as fast as maybe a mobile web app going to be, but that needs to go much faster than it would ever be in mode 1. So I think we have to be a little more nuanced in what we're doing, and be careful about not letting things that shouldn't slip back into mode 1 get there before your market, your digital business is stabilized.
I just have one comment to add on to that, often it's the interface capability that we're really talking about here, so it's not necessarily the transaction capability. Or for instance, if you were going to put a new kind of payment system, I don't know, a Venmo or something, into your application, it most likely still has to interface with your existing systems of record. So it's not always a replacement. It's often an integration. And really the point there is that the differentiating application has to be able to be wedded onto the existing applications in a way that provides the user interface and the customer experience that you want without disrupting, destroying, or replacing the transactional infrastructure underlying the business.
Yeah, great point, Kirby.
Thanks, Kirby. Okay, so Diane, we've got a question here. This comes from Joe. Joe says, I haven't heard of reverse mentoring before. Can you give me some simple ways to get started doing that internally?
Sure. So, one, you can just start either informally screening or actually open up more officially a reverse mentoring program to the organization and maybe to some select universities or other institutions outside the company, saying, well, you're going to get to spend time and learn from a senior business leader, but they need to learn just as much from you. So I think you need to, your digital transformation effort as part of its education capability needs to run that program. It can be done in a very lightweight fashion, even using digital tools. But in most organizations, it does need to happen. And it seems like a really soft thing for a technology department to do, but it's absolutely essential to break down the barriers and accelerate digital transformation.
Thanks. Okay, question here from Jessica. Jessica says, we want to create a Mode 2 team, but find it difficult to find developers capable in that area. Any suggestions?
Kirby, you want to take that one?
So this comes up quite often, actually. So there's several ways to do it, right? Home brew, and train your people as fast as you can on the modern approaches to development. There are also a variety of consultants which are popping up where folks who have skill sets in this space are for hire. And if you can actually check in with our website, you can see some partners who are doing that with us. And then we're seeing a lot of interest at the university level as well, both through sort of MOOC, massive online programs, and regular training programs. Mendix does have a certification program to learn online, and you can get yourself certified and take a test at the end of the online program to at least become, modestly competent. And then we have an expert program as well for those who want to take it to the next level. So it is actually a challenge in the industry right now that there are not enough sort of Mode 2 development business engineers out there, developers with a strong business sense that can build these applications, and something that we're all concerned about.
Yeah, and I would just add to that you can find technology stacks now that do have kind of the purest version of Mode 2 that require the least amount of education. They already have a proven path carved through it that don't require years of learning how to do something, that you can have developers and even non-developers become very effective and productive in hours and days. And that's truly remarkable advance, I think, and deliberately seeking out tools that have those capabilities and those time frames built into their design. I think it can really get you ahead.
Well, gentlemen, we've actually come to the end of our time together. So thank you both so much for your time and for the wonderful presentation. And as I said, it is time to end our presentation. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for 2016 is the Year of Digital Innovation, Best Practices for Becoming a Digital Transformation Visionary. I'm Karen Bannon, and on behalf of Diane Hinchcliffe and Kirby Wadsworth, Mendix, and everyone at the Ziff Davis family of publications, thank you so much for your time and have a great day.